In July 2013, in Perpignan, a legionnaire reports his wife and daughter missing.
Mr. Benitez arrives in a state of total chaos. He can't talk straight. He's crying. He's devastated.
The investigation is unable to track down Marie-Josée Benitez and her daughter, Allison.
The bank cards of the two missing women aren't working. Their cell phones aren't working either. They're not receiving any messages, and that's worrying.
Why would Allison, who dreamed of being Miss Roussillon, willingly leave just before the contest?
For Allison, the beauty pageant was a big deal in her life as a young woman. She spent weeks preparing for it. It was all she thought about.
While the search for both women is underway, Francisco Benitez dies by suicide.
He hanged himself out of a window. His face was covered by a scarf.
For many, this suicide is an admission of guilt.
From the moment he killed himself, I thought it was him.
Today, the investigators suspect that Francisco Benitez killed his wife and daughter. They're also looking into his involvement in other cases.
You can't help but wonder if someone's capable of killing, whether they've killed others before.
The Montpellier police are still trying to determine the circumstances of the tragedy. We're in the Eastern Pyrenees in Perpignan. In July 2013, this city was the setting of a particularly memorable criminal case. This tragedy begins with the mysterious disappearance of Allison and her mother, Marie-Josée. A couple weeks later, the husband and father, Francisco Benitez, a legionnaire with an exemplary career, kills himself violently while the investigation to find both women is underway. The investigation conducted by the Montpellier police then manages to gather incriminating evidence against the husband and father. But to this day, with the main suspect dead by suicide and the victims' bodies never found, many questions are still unanswered. We're looking back at a case that remains unsolved to this day. On Monday, July 22, 2013, Francisco Benitez, a 50-year-old military man, goes to the police station in Perpignan to report his wife and daughter missing. Etienne Nicolot Esquire, Marie-Josée Benitez's sister's attorney, recalls the start of the case.
When he goes to the police station on July 22nd, he doesn't file a report. He doesn't tell the police, "My wife's gone missing." He says, "I don't have time to wait." He simply leaves his name to mark his visit.
In a hurry, Francisco Benitez leaves the station without speaking to a detective, and without mentioning that Allison, his 19-year-old daughter, and Marie-Josée, his 53-year-old wife, have been missing for 8 days. On July 24th, Allison's friends, who are very worried, go to the police station. The officers listen to them and decide to set up a meeting the following day with Francisco Benitez. Frank Rovira is the Deputy Departmental Secretary of the Alliance Police Union. He recalls the husband and father's behavior during his first statement.
He's accompanied by his stepdaughter and he's picked up by the investigators. He arrives in a total state of chaos. He can't talk, he's crying, he's devastated.
Francisco Benitez states that he hasn't heard from his wife or daughter since July 14th. He adds that they left the family home after a heated argument. Laure Moisset, reporter for L'Indépendant, has been following this double disappearance since the start.
To begin with, they were arguing about an electricity bill. The two women went away to talk to each other. They packed their bags and they left.
Lydia, Francisco Benitez's stepdaughter, then shows the investigators a text message she received from her mother on the day of her disappearance at 5:17 p.m. Christian Goutorbe, reporter for La Dépêche du Midi, was able to read this message.
Marie-Josée explains in this text that she has just made a difficult decision. I'm going to Toulouse with Allison. I love you all.
This message is succinct. It's not clear why she simply says, "I've left," without explaining why and without talking about the circumstances.
Francisco Benitez tells the police that his wife has previously disappeared for several days without a word.
Apparently, she would leave, she would come back, but actually this time, she hasn't come back home.
The officers at Perpignan police station asked the husband and father to give a detailed account of the day of the disappearance. The military man says that on Sunday, July 14th at 9 a.m., he drove Allison to Canet and Roussillon. The young woman, a contestant in the Miss Roussillon pageant, was scheduled to meet with the other contenders. On that day, John Mujol was in charge of photographing the contestants. He clearly remembers Allison's attitude towards her dream.
During the shoot, she's completely relaxed, in a good mood. She's having fun.
At midday, the beauty pageant contestants go to a restaurant. Allison suddenly starts behaving strangely.
It's plain to see that Allison isn't taking part in the conversation at all. She's very focused on her phone, and after a while, she tells us her dad is texting her. That's all she says. It's a discussion that troubles her. It's a discussion that bothers her and makes her angry.
At 2 p.m., Francisco Benitez drives back to pick up his daughter and take her home. The next day, the young woman's absence from the Miss Roussillon pageant rehearsal surprises everyone.
At 6 p.m., she isn't there, and the head of the Miss Roussillon committee is concerned. She sends her a text. She tries to call her, but no answer.
They're very worried because she's very eager to do the Miss Roussillon pageant. She has taken part in all the preparation activities for the contest, which is due to take place a few weeks later, so it's unthinkable for her not to be there. Unthinkable.
If she hadn't wanted to come, she would have told us. It really wasn't normal.
Unable to reach Allison on her cell phone, John Mujol tries to contact her through social media.
I try to see if she's online. I try to see if she'll answer. I send a message, but I don't get a reply. My message isn't read.
On July 25th at 12:30 p.m., the Perpignan Public Prosecutor's Department is informed of the double disappearance. But Marie-Josée Benitez and her daughter Allison, being adults, are absolutely within their rights to leave the home without a word. Their absence could be voluntary. No legal proceedings are opened. However, the deputy public prosecutor asked the police to carry out some checks. Analysis of Marie-Josée and Allison Benitez's phone records revealed that neither woman has used their cell phone since July 14, 2013, the day of their disappearance.
What astonishes the investigators is that Marie-Josée and Allison's cell phones stopped sending and receiving signals at the same time. Immediately after the message was sent to the stepdaughter. And that's surprising, because it's hard to see why there would be such a coincidence between this message and the phone stopping.
At 5:30 p.m., both women's cell phones were turned off. Continuing their initial investigations, the police take a statement from a friend of Allison's, who went to her home on July 16th. This young man was very surprised by Francisco Benitez's attitude.
He rings the bell, no answer. He rings a second time, and that's when Francisco Benitez appears at the window on the second floor. Allison's friend explains that nobody has heard from the young women, and they're worried. And Benitez reassures him very quickly. She has gone with her mother to Toulouse. They're fine, they're well, and they've switched off their phones.
So the investigators head to the family home located at 28 Rue Jean Richepin, in a quiet residential neighborhood of Perpignan. Francisco Benitez is present and assists with the investigation.
Nothing jumps out. Everything's in order. On the whole, it's pretty tidy, except for the office, which is a mess. Benitez has a simple explanation. I was looking through the papers for a document that might shed light on my wife and daughter's whereabouts.
The police officers look for witnesses in the neighborhood.
The apartment block on Rue Jean Richepin is in a very particular situation in July 2013. Since July 13th, meaning the day before, the neighbors have been on vacation. So this means that Francisco Benitez is all alone. At least the Benitez family is completely alone in the building.
Nobody saw Allison and her mother leaving the house on July 14th. The neighborhood investigation didn't turn up anything important. No one described hearing screams. No one gave evidence that could guide the investigation.
The mystery of the double disappearance remains unsolved. At this stage of the investigation, a voluntary departure remains the main hypothesis. The city's CCTV footage is requisitioned, especially from the area around the station.
As neither of them has a driver's license, the most likely explanation is that they took the train. So all the checks were carried out at Perpignan train station. And from the cameras and the witness statements, we know that they never took a train from Perpignan to go to Toulouse.
The investigators then examine the two women's bank accounts. But no transactions have been recorded since the day of their disappearance.
This means the two missing women's bank cards aren't working. Their cell phones aren't working either. They aren't receiving messages, and that's worrying. It's worrying because it shows that not only have they disappeared, but they're not showing any signs of life.
There is growing concern. What if the two women had met with the wrong kind of person? On July 30th, the Perpignan police decide to launch an appeal for witnesses in the press. Laure Moiset clearly recalls her reaction when she received this missing person appeal.
Two disappearances at the same time. Two women. Is strange, especially if they've decided to disappear of their own accord. It's already extremely difficult for one person to disappear on their own, so two should be easy to find.
Allison's friends rallied together and put up posters all over the city. Oddly, Francisco Benitez takes a back seat.
In this kind of disappearance, as a general rule, the family comes here to ask us, please, put out a call for witnesses, help us find our family members. But we haven't seen Francisco Benitez.
Reporter Christian Goutorbe reaches out to the husband and father.
I spoke to him on the phone. I told him, Mr. Benitez, you know, if you want to send a message to your daughter, to your wife, to the kidnapper, if there is one, we can relay your message. And he said to me, no, I've lost hope.
The call for witnesses brings no new leads. On July 13th, the national media is gripped by this double disappearance. The news is on every television channel. This is how Edwige Barbet, Marie-Josée's sister, learns of her disappearance.
I was shaking. I had a panic attack. Then I thought, well, maybe she has nothing. Maybe they haven't disappeared. Maybe she knows that I live in Loire-Garonne. I was waiting. Maybe she was going to turn up at my door.
Eric Barbet, Marie-Josée's brother, also finds out from television that his sister and his niece have been missing for 17 days.
We thought, there's something weird going on. So I called Mr. Benitez. I asked him why he hadn't called me. He told me he didn't want to worry the family. His voice sounded strange, and you could sense from his words that he wasn't doing well. He really wasn't doing well. He was panicking.
By the end of July, Marie-Josée and Allison Benitez had been missing for 15 days. However, Jean-Marc gets the feeling that the investigators aren't particularly alarmed by the two women's absence.
In France, every day, a good 100 or so disappearances are reported to the police. Most of these disappearances, the vast majority of them, are voluntary disappearances of adults and are very temporary. So the investigators are faced with a fairly common situation. A husband and father who reports his wife and daughter missing after a domestic dispute. The investigators have no reason to doubt his word, especially as his claims are backed up by his stepdaughter, his wife's eldest child.
The investigators discovered that Marie-Josée and Allison's cell phones were deactivated at the same time, and that neither woman's bank card has been used since their disappearance. These are worrying signs.
No, not necessarily. It's possible to imagine that Allison and Marie-Josée left voluntarily, and they know, as everyone does, that to avoid being tracked down and found quickly, they have to avoid using their cards and cell phones.
A few days after the disappearances, Francisco Benitez and his stepdaughter discovered while opening Marie-José's mail that she received 1,080 euros in unemployment benefit each month, even though she had told her husband she received no income.
This discovery, which was brought to the attention of the investigators, gave credence to the idea of a voluntary departure. Marie-Josée could very well have saved this money in cash, precisely to avoid having to use her bank card.
On July 30th, 2013, the investigators put out an appeal for witnesses in the press. Quickly, the reporters on the case are astonished by Francisco Benitez's behavior. Not only did the legionnaire delay reporting the disappearances, but he also didn't get involved in the search. What do you think of the father's attitude?
This behavior might appear suspicious, but on the other hand, if his wife had really left him, we can understand why Chief Warrant Officer Benitez doesn't want to be seen by everyone as an abandoned husband.
When Allison goes missing with her mother, she's preparing for the Miss Roussillon beauty pageant. For everyone who knows her, it's unthinkable that she could have given up on this contest that means so much to her.
That's very troubling indeed, especially if you add the fact that the missing person appeal has turned up nothing. We know these two women without driver's licenses have to use public transport. They should have attracted the attention of witnesses, all the more so because Allison is a very pretty girl who doesn't go unnoticed. I'm honestly surprised that no one saw them.
To find out more, the police start looking into Marie-Josée and Allison's lives. They want to understand who these two women are and what could have driven them to vanish without a word. The investigators learn about Marie-Josée Benitez's lifestyle. Christine Livolsi, her best friend, describes her reserved character.
Marie is a very kind, very calm, very gentle girl.
We don't talk much about her life or her worries.
Marie-Josée had a difficult childhood in Ferrone, in the north of France. Her mother's repeated absences forced her to look after her little sister.
My sister raised me when I was younger. She was the one who got me up in the morning. We did a lot of things together.
At 17 years old, Marie-Josée gave birth to Lydia, her first child. 2 years later, she had a son, but Marie-Josée soon separated from the father of her children. She went on to have a series of tumultuous and short-lived relationships. At 28 years old, the young woman had 4 children from 3 different fathers, 2 girls and 2 boys, that she was raising alone with the help of her mother. Laurent Epailly Esquire, lawyer to Marie-Josée's 2 daughters, touches on her chaotic existence.
She'd be seen as a woman of questionable morals. Without a doubt, she's a woman who has cheated often, or who has been cheated on often by the different fathers. When you have children with someone, unfortunately, they don't always turn out to be the right person.
In 1988, Marie-Josée left the north of France and moved to Marseille, hoping for a better life. To provide for her 4 children, she worked nights as a hostess at a bar. That's where in 1989 she met Francisco Benitez, a legionnaire from Spain known as Paco.
He bought her some drinks, and they chatted. And then she got attached to him.
She's seduced by this man, who's a legionnaire, and they move in together pretty quickly.
According to Philippe Capsier Esquire, Eric Barbet's attorney, Marie-Josée saw the legionnaire as her savior. A new life was opening up for her.
You can imagine, for someone with a complicated family background, marrying a military man was something unimaginable. So she found in Mr. Benitez an anchor point and a security that she had never known before.
Francisco Benitez seemed like the perfect man, the one who would finally make Marie-Josée happy.
I found him nice, polite, sweet. He seemed to love my sister.
There were sweet little words. There was always a tender gesture.
Not long after moving in with Francisco Benitez, Marie-Josée suddenly broke off all ties with her family. Her sister Edwige would eventually understand why.
Paco wanted to get rid of the people close to my sister, to have her all to himself. We all followed our own paths. Just as she followed hers, I followed mine, my brother followed his.
At that time, Francisco Benitez looked after Marie-Josée's two daughters, Roxanne and Lydia. The two boys, however, had a strained relationship with their mother and stepfather. On May 24, 1994, Marie-Josée gave birth to a little girl. The arrival of Allison, born from her love with Francisco Benitez, was a total joy for her.
Allison and Marie-Josée Benitez were inseparable. They spent every day together, 24/7.
Allison, c'était sa vie, quoi.
It was almost too much. They were like friends.
In October 2006, Francisco Benitez, while posted in Mayotte, married Marie-Josée. A few years later, Allison, noticing her mother's pain over breaking off from her past, got in touch with her uncle through social media. Eric Barbet reconnected with his sister after 20 years apart.
I knocked on the door, and Marie-Josée came to open it. I remember she was coming out of the kitchen and dropped everything. Then she started crying and shaking. It was very, very moving.
Eric Barbet then spent a week with them in Perpignan. He shot this video of Allison on her hospital bed after wisdom tooth surgery. Eric Barbet discovered his sister's happy family life.
They were very, very close. There wasn't a single angry word, a gesture, or look. No. You could see very clearly that all was well.
When Allison disappeared in July 2013, she was only 19 years old. Standing 5'8", this beautiful dark-eyed brunette made heads turn on the streets of Perpignan, as her friend Antoine Fernandez often noticed.
She was a very pretty girl, that's for sure. She was really sweet, smiley, always laughing.
Adorable. She was a sweetheart, just like her mother.
Francisco Benitez adores his daughter.
She was the apple of his eye. She was everything to him. She was really the person he loved most.
At first, he only talked about her. Allison, my daughter, that's all we heard.
After getting her vocational qualification in hairstyling, Allison worked as a trainee at a salon. But the young woman's mind was elsewhere. She dreamed of becoming Miss France, so she decided to take part in the Miss Roussillon contest.
For Allison, the beauty pageant was a big deal in her life as a young woman. She spent weeks preparing for it. It was all she thought about. So much so that she left her training course at the salon to prepare for it.
This contest, which she would never compete in, was to take place on August 11, 2013. Marie-Josée and her husband were convinced their daughter would be crowned.
Her parents were really behind her. For them, she was already Miss France. She was the favorite. She was the prettiest. She was supposed to win.
On Thursday, August 1st, 2013, the Perpignan police summoned Francisco Benitez again. It has now been 17 days since Marie-Josée and Allison disappeared. The Legionnaire's statement provides no new evidence. He repeats that his wife and daughter left the family home without telling him where they were going. The husband and father also expresses his concern and confusion. The public prosecutor then orders a full police search of the family home and investigations to uncover any traces of blood. At 12:30 p.m., Francisco Benitez goes home. Several reporters are already outside his home, hoping to get an interview.
He parks his car in the garage. I'm lucky enough to get him on the phone for 2 minutes. He tells me that on the whole, he's lost hope. He's falling apart. His family has definitely been taken away from him. And what he's going through is terrible. He cries on the phone, then he hangs up.
At 2:30 p.m., investigators from the Perpignan police force arrive at 28 Rue Jean Richepin. They are joined by officers and forensic identification technicians from the Montpellier police. Together, they begin the search of the Benitez family's apartment. The property, located on the second floor, is made up of a large living room, 3 bedrooms, an office, and a veranda with a terrace. Francisco Benitez is present as each room is searched. No suspicious evidence captures the investigators' attention.
In the apartment, there are no traces of blood to suggest that something happened.
The crime scene investigators then spray Blue Star, a chemical tool which uncovers bloodstains that are invisible to the naked eye. Then they turn off all the lights in the apartment. Several distinctive spots appear.
The investigators find suspicious stains at the bottom of the counter in the apartment, at the foot of the bed, in Francisco and Marie-Josée Benitez's bedroom, in Allison Benitez's bedroom too, and in a sink in the bathroom.
But for the investigators, these small stains don't prove anything.
Nothing revealed by Blue Star at the scene indicated that this was a crime scene.
The officers then go into the garage to continue their search. That's when Francisco Benitez loses his cool.
He was very, very nervous, to the point that an investigating officer stepped in to tell him it was all normal and legal. In fact, it ended up exonerating him.
Nothing in the garage is out of place. 2 cigarette ends are found in an ashtray and put in sealed bags. Francisco Benitez tells the investigators that his wife is the only smoker in the family. Blue Star is used again, but this time it reacts in a much more meaningful way.
The stains they find aren't tiny drops of blood. They're really large footprints, and plenty of them. They're clean prints. They aren't the prints of someone who slipped.
We know something happened in this garage, but we don't yet know what.
The forensic identification technicians take samples of the prints revealed by Blue Star. Outside the apartment, the reporters are asking questions.
The search drags on. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Soon, the search has been going on for 4 hours. 4-hour search is a long time. When it gets to 6 p.m., among our colleagues, we're saying this is it. He's going to be arrested. There's no other possibility. A 4-hour search means they've found something. And then, in the end, nothing.
No. Following this search, Francisco Benitez will not be taken into custody.
He was the last person to see my sister and my niece. He's the one who picked up my niece from Canet. Why didn't they arrest him? But Paco was a smooth talker. He must have said what the inspectors wanted to hear, and so they didn't arrest him. He manipulated them, that's for sure.
Francisco Benitez is very persuasive. You can see how he manages to project an image of innocence.
There's no doubt that members of the military, on the whole, benefit from a presumption of respect, of a sense of honor, of keeping their word. When a member of the military tells you something, You take it at face value.
At 7 p.m., the investigators leave the property.
The police say he'll be questioned again on the 5th, 4 days later, and they tell him they're going to carry out further investigations. But they don't say this as a threat. They tell him this to put his mind at ease, to let him know they won't abandon the search, and they will try to solve his wife and daughter's disappearance.
Following the search and forensic investigations, the police leave the family home on Rue Richepin. Traces of blood have been revealed by chemicals, and yet Francisco Benitez hasn't been taken into custody. Does that surprise you?
Yes, I think that at the time of the investigation, I would have decided without any qualms to put him in police custody. Police custody to try and get a more detailed explanation of the circumstances around Marie-Josée and Allison's disappearance, and police custody to try and get an explanation for the stains revealed by Blue Star in the garage and the apartment. But in defense of the investigators, Blue Star doesn't necessarily reveal traces of human blood. It could be traces of animal blood. And above all, Blue Star can give what we call false positives, especially on surfaces that have been cleaned with pure bleach. And one more thing to be clear, Blue Star reacts in the same way to blood or bleach.
According to Marie-Josée Benitez's daughter's lawyers, if the legionnaire wasn't taken into custody, it was because, as a military man, his word was seen as more believable than a civilian's. Do you understand this viewpoint?
No, that doesn't make any sense. The culture of investigation, the foundation of investigation, is doubt. And the investigators question the word of someone in the military as much as a homeless person's, the word of a minister as much as a priest's. When it comes to arrests, the only ones who benefit from their status are diplomats, senators, congressmen, and the president. This status gives them what's called immunity.
While leaving the apartment, the officers inform Francisco Benitez that he will be questioned again 4 days later. Why this delay? And above all, why warn the legionnaire?
I have a feeling the police still aren't convinced that there's foul play behind the two disappearances. They find it hard to imagine Francisco Benitez being capable of killing his daughter Allison. Everyone describes him as a father who loves and practically worships his only daughter. But most of all, I think they were taken aback by the stains revealed by Blue Star in the garage and the apartment. They want to give themselves some time to come up with a new strategy.
On Friday, August 2nd, 2013, a legal investigation is launched by the Perpignan Public Prosecutor's Department to find the reasons behind the disappearances. The Montpellier police force oversees the investigation. One of the first orders is to wiretap Francisco Benitez. It's clear the police want to get new evidence before the interview with the legionnaire scheduled for Monday, August 5th. On Saturday, August 3rd, 2013, Francisco Benitez flees the family home to escape media coverage of the case.
Over the last 2 days, naturally, Rue Jean Richepin had become a sort of media circus. There were lots of reporters around, watching his comings and goings, of course. And at least in the barracks, he could relax, since from the moment he came through the gate, he could do what he wanted.
On Sunday, August 4th, Eric Barbet, Marie-José's brother, arrives in Perpignan with his wife. At 6 p.m., Francisco Benitez arrives in his car to pick them up from their hotel.
He's distressed. He's lost. He's shaking and crying. He tells me, I'm cracking. I can't do this anymore. They're all pointing the finger at me. We try to understand him and support him at the same time.
An hour later, Eric Barbet and his wife part ways with the legionnaire. They call him again later in the evening to express their support.
He tells me, no, it's okay now that you're here. It's reassuring me a bit. I'll see you tomorrow. I feel much better.
At 11:30 p.m., Francisco Benitez is seen by one of his neighbors leaving the family home on Rue Jean Richepin in ceremonial dress. The legionnaire returns to his barracks. That night, he sends an email to his colonel from his office.
He asks to be remembered as the legionnaire he was before. Does he mean before the disappearance? Or before what he may have done? We don't know.
On Monday, August 5th, 2013, at 7:20 a.m., Francisco Benitez is found dead by one of his colleagues at the Perpignan military barracks.
He hanged himself out a window in the interior courtyard, with his face covered by a scarf.
Psychiatrist Paul Bensoussan, specialist at La Cour de Cassation, breaks down this act for us.
Some people hang themselves in the pajamas, and others dress up for the final scene. In his case, he chose his legionnaire uniform. There's a concern about his appearance. There's a desire to look good, right down to the aesthetics of the act itself.
Edwige, Marie-Josée's sister, is dumbfounded when she finds out about her brother-in-law's death.
He's not the kind of guy to kill himself. Because Paco's a strong man. He's not the kind of guy to throw in the towel like that overnight. It's not like him at all. I'm telling you, he's a fighter.
Police officers also inform Eric Barbet of Francisco Benitez's death. He goes immediately to the barracks. He then makes a statement to the reporters.
He was frantic. He was distraught. He was at the end of his tether. He was in despair.
Eric Barbet sends his sister, Marie-Josée, who went missing with Allison 3 weeks ago, a desperate appeal.
Wherever you are, call me. I'm in Perpignan. We're waiting. We're waiting.
The mayor of Perpignan, Jean-Marc Pujol, is informed of the legionnaire's suicide. The news comes as a real shock.
From the moment he kills himself, I think it's him. When his wife and daughter left him, the search, now I'm thinking things are getting murky. There's a contradiction between wanting to find these people and killing yourself.
A man who's anxiously waiting to find out what's happened to his wife and daughter doesn't commit suicide, even if he's wrongly suspected. He fights, he protests, he waits to find out.
Francisco Benitez died by suicide when he was due to be interviewed again by the police. He was also due to attend on Monday, August 5th, 2013, another search of the family home.
He knows the noose is tightening around him. He knows he can't bear the weight of this secret. And he knows that this time, everything is lost.
There are two things. There's the desire to escape the noose tightening around him, but there's also this kind of challenge you find with people who commit infanticide, which goes, you'll never find out, you'll never know. And the only way, and the best way to issue this challenge is to commit suicide, so that it remains a mystery.
A few hours after Francisco Benitez's suicide, a legal investigation is opened into the cause of death. An autopsy is carried out in Montpellier, and the Legionnaire's office is searched. No evidence is found to cast doubt on suicide as the cause of death. Before ending his life, the Legionnaire wrote a letter in which he declares his innocence and asks to be cremated. At this point, the investigators discover the military man also recorded a video the day before his death.
Hello, everyone. I'm Allison's dad. For 3 weeks, we've been going through some very serious things, some very hard times. The hardest thing for us has been reading the things people have commented and said without knowing what's going on in our lives. We're a family like every other family, with ups and downs. The people who really know me know full well that Allison is my life. But only people who know me can know that. Right now, I don't know if my daughter will be found, because it's already been 3 weeks since she went missing. And my daughter would never do something like this, to not get in touch or anything. It's impossible, and I know it's impossible. That's why today, there are a lot of things going on through our minds, and we're holding on, but it's too hard. We're on the verge of exploding. But this video isn't meant to shock people, just to tell people that we're a normal family with a father, a mother, and children. And this isn't a story about a legionnaire. No, it's about the heart, a family. That's all.
The investigators learned that this video was filmed in Francisco Benitez's office at the military barracks. It was Lydia, Marie-Josée's eldest daughter, who held the camera. A few hours after recording the video, the legionnaire contacted reporter from Perpignan, Pauline Lallemand.
He sent me a text which said, "I'm going to give you a video and some photos of my daughter."
The meeting took place at 5 p.m. at Catalogne Square in Perpignan.
I don't recognize him at first, because I've already seen photos of him where he looked more imposing. Now I see him thinner, he asked me to get in. We don't say a word. I can feel that the atmosphere is very, very heavy and that I shouldn't talk at this moment.
Francisco Benitez drove for a few minutes, then parked in a small alleyway, out of sight. Then he took out a tablet and played his statement to the reporter.
While watching himself, he bursts into tears. Everything in the video he repeats to me in an intense way, almost to convince me too.
The legionnaire also brought several photographs.
He gives me around 20 photos of his daughter. There isn't a single photo of his wife. And every time I say Marie-Josée's name, he says, "No, we're not talking about her. He doesn't want to speak about his wife."
The military man insisted that the reporter broadcast the video that evening on the website of the magazine Paris Match. It was put online a few hours later, but went completely unnoticed. It's only after the news breaks of the suicide on the morning of August 5th, when journalists are searching for information about Francisco Benitez, that they discover the video on the internet. It is then played repeatedly all over the media.
He prepared the stunt, his departure, and he had a precise plan. He carried it out like you carry out orders in the army.
Bonjour à tout le monde, je suis le papa d'Allison. Avant tout, je tiens à remercier tous ses amis.
We have a tearful man, probably too tearful, whose emotion seems theatrical. I wouldn't say he's declaring his innocence. I'd say he's sweating with anxiety, and he keeps repeating those words, which are practically meaningless. We're a normal family. It's strange to make a public declaration, not to express your concern or protest your innocence, but to proclaim your normality.
Allison is my life. I'm not sure my daughter will be found because she's been missing for 3 weeks already.
If we analyze the speech in this video, we're struck by the fact that he only talks about his daughter and not, or very little, about his wife. But emotionally, if we pay a bit less attention to the content and look at the video as a whole, what's striking is he only talks about himself.
We're holding on, but we're on the verge of exploding.
With his suicide, Francisco Benitez goes from being the principal witness to the #1 suspect in this case.
The video has the opposite effect to what he was expecting. In other words, while he explains that he has nothing to do with it, that he's suffering, everyone gets the feeling that this isn't clear, and on the contrary, if he's making this video, it's precisely because he has something to feel ashamed of.
Francisco Benitez's suicide is a dramatic turn of events in this case. We later learned that over the weekend, he had mentioned on the phone to some of his loved ones that he wanted to take his own life. We know he was being wiretapped, so how could he have done it? Why didn't the police intervene?
It's not like in the movies, where a detective always has headphones on, listening to every phone conversation. In reality, most of the time, the calls are recorded on a hard drive and then listened to, decrypted, and transcribed the next day or the day after they take place. In plain, the Montpellier police only discovered the phone conversations in which Francisco Benitez declared his intention to kill himself a few hours after his death.
What we've also discovered is that Francisco Benitez wasn't under physical surveillance. In other words, he wasn't being followed by the police that weekend.
No tailing or surveillance measures were put in place that weekend. With hindsight, of course, we can say it's regrettable. You can imagine the investigators would have been interested in monitoring his movements before his interview on Monday. But it wasn't done, in my opinion, for two reasons. On one hand, it's very complicated to organize for someone to be tailed. You need people to effectively follow an individual, one person, 24 hours a day, for around 48 hours. You need at least roughly 10 or so officers. On the other hand, this is the first weekend in August. It's a vacation weekend. The investigators, who have been on this case since the start in July, are going on vacation. The ones coming back from vacation, who are filling in, aren't up to date on the case.
So you say it's regrettable, but because of his lack of surveillance, the police lost the key witness in their investigation?
Indeed, since the start of this case, everything has been based solely on Francisco Benitez's statements. He's more than a key witness, he's the investigator's only source of information. But frankly, no one saw this suicide coming. It's very rare for a suspect to commit suicide a few hours before being interviewed.
Do you see this suicide as an admission of guilt?
A psychiatrist, a journalist, or the wider public might interpret this act in that way, and of course, it's tempting to do so. But as an investigator, whose approach can only be based on material, verifiable, and cross-checkable facts, interpreting a suicide in such a clear-cut way doesn't make any sense.
The story of the Legionnaire's suicide made headlines. The news was reported across all local and national media, and Allison and her mother didn't appear, which was highly concerning for the police.
Yes, until then the searches were being conducted in the hope of finding them alive. But from that point on, the investigators were definitely moving in the direction of foul play.
A few hours after news of Francisco Benitez's suicide broke, Perpignan's deputy public prosecutor responded to reporters' questions. Lamenting the loss of a key witness, he said the Legionnaire was gone and had taken his secrets with him. The police are now going to do whatever they can to find out who Francisco Benitez really was. One of 5 children, Francisco Benitez was born in 1963 in Algeciras in Andalusia. At 23 years old, he joined the Spanish Legion, cutting all ties with his family.
We don't know anything about his childhood. We don't know anything about the relationships that he may have had with his brothers and sisters or his parents. We don't know the reasons why he joined the Spanish Legion. So we have a big gap in Mr. Benitez's life before his time in the military.
Francisco Benitez was always very secretive about his past in Spain.
He was quick to dismiss his Spanish origins and history, preferring to stay focused on the present and his life in the city of Perpignan. I always had the impression he didn't want to go too deep into those topics.
The investigators start looking into the military man's professional background. In 1987, a few months after being deployed in Spain, Francisco Benitez joined the French Foreign Legion in Castelnaudary. He soon stood out for his performance. He rose through the ranks and traveled the world on missions to various conflict zones. Former Legionnaire Alexei Kent was his trainer. He followed his career, which was exemplary.
He got the Medal of the Nation's Gratitude, the Silver National Defense Medal, and the UN Kosovo Medal. He has quite a few. He has even more than me. My student has more medals than me.
The testimonies of his colleagues also paint a portrait of a Legionnaire with an impeccable service record.
An unquestionably good record, charisma, someone men readily obeyed and trusted. All highly prized criteria from the Foreign Legion's point of view.
From speaking with some of his friends at the time, it was clear that he was respected and had a good reputation.
Marie-Josée and Allison followed him wherever he was deployed. In 2000, the family moved to Nîmes, then to Mayotte 5 years later, and finally Perpignan in 2010. Chief Warrant Officer Francisco Benitez was in charge of regional recruitment. He managed the French Foreign Legion Information Office at the Joffre Barracks. It was an important position.
He has no boss above him. He's his own boss.
One of Francisco Benitez's duties was to represent the Legion at ceremonies and festivals in the city of Perpignan.
He's a man who's well established and who comes across well.
He does his job perfectly. He's always present. He's always dressed to the nines.
Perfectly ironed shirts. Always very well dressed at his functions. That drew attention.
He was a man who looked perfect, which was in stark contrast to his true character.
The police soon gather evidence that dents his image as an exemplary legionnaire.
Beyond the military veneer, there was an ambiguity about him. Some people criticized him openly, particularly for the way that he served. He was depicted as someone calculating and cruel, someone with a tendency to abuse his power.
The investigators then look into Francisco Benitez's personal life.
By digging around, you realize Benitez isn't very present in his family. He doesn't spend many nights at home. Most of the time, he sleeps in the barracks.
The investigation reveals that his wife, Marie-Josée, has wanted to divorce him for several months. The police discover that the couple has been on the verge of splitting up since Christmas 2012, when Allison made a terrible discovery.
Allison apparently went through her father's cell phone, found a message from Francisco Benitez's mistress, and told her mother, which led to arguments between the couple and the decision to break up.
We know that Allison was disturbed by this discovery and that she actually tried to find out a bit more.
The month before her disappearance, Allison kept track of her father's activities, monitoring his social media posts and regularly checking his phone.
And at one point, she even straight up follows him. She asks one of her friends to drive her. She wears a wig as a disguise. She follows him to the barracks to find out exactly what's going on, what he's doing, and who he's seeing. Because she's convinced that her father is having an affair with another woman, or maybe even several. And she isn't wrong.
The investigation confirms Allison's doubts, revealing that the legionnaire was racking up notches on his bedpost.
He had between 6 and 10 mistresses at the same time. I think, in the end, he must have been sick.
He had one everywhere. One in Paris, 2 at the Legion, 1 in Spain.
They're married women. They're women he meets on online dating sites. He uses his position as a legionnaire, his rank, and his Spanish origins.
He's the handsome, brooding type. He's a smooth talker. He's attentive.
His approach is very romantic. He writes letters, he sends parcels signed from your legionnaire.
Dr. Paul Bensoussan analyzes this need for seduction.
If I seduce, if I conquer, I make sure I can always generate esteem and affection. And I keep women on the back burner, so to speak, who will take care of me. Above all, in my opinion, behind this seductive behavior is major emotional insecurity.
Francisco Benitez's multiple infidelities shattered the close relationship he had with his daughter.
Every time they had any kind of argument, she didn't hesitate to say, "Go take care of your mistresses. Don't worry about me. Mama's here."
At some point, she got nasty. She spoke badly to him because she was angry.
The investigation reveals that Marie-Josée Benitez knew her husband had been cheating on her for years. No divorce proceedings had been filed, but the couple had decided to separate in September. The officers find out that behind this legionnaire with an impeccable service record, a hypocrite was hiding. A husband and father who was leading a double life. New inquiries are launched to establish Francisco Benitez's activities since the day his wife and daughter went missing. The police go through the Legionnaire's bank statements. That's when they discover a record of some surprising purchases made on July 16th, 2 days after the double disappearance.
He bought a tarp and a great deal of bleach. It makes you think the tarp could have been used to temporarily hide the bodies, and the bleach to deep clean the place where the crimes may have been committed.
A witness reports having seen Francisco Benitez mopping the terrace of the family's apartment, a highly unusual activity.
Mr. Benitez didn't do housework. He didn't do laundry. He didn't help out at home at all. Marie-Josée was the one who took care of everything.
The police also analyze the content of the serviceman's computer. They find in his internet search history proof that the legionnaire has looked up the perfect crime and reinforced tarp. The investigators then interview Francisco Benitez's colleagues. One soldier reports bumping into him on July 15th at the barracks, carrying a bloody sheet.
He's washing them in the washing machine. So one of his colleagues is surprised. He explains that there was a problem with the freezer and there was meat inside, and he had to mop up the blood with a sheet.
Another legionnaire states that he helped Francisco Benitez move the freezer from his residence on Rue Jean Richepin to the barracks. He says it was between July 16th and 19th.
The freezer is tied up with a rope, and Francisco Benitez is clearly adamant that nobody opened the freezer.
Witness statements confirm that he was seen in the barracks cleaning a freezer.
The police try to make a timeline of the legionnaire's activities over the days before his suicide. They find out that Francisco Benitez was spotted several times at a seaside resort some 18 miles from Perpignan.
He spends the whole afternoon at a beach club in Port-Lucat. Francisco Benitez is living the life of Riley. He isn't searching for his daughter or his wife. He's sunbathing.
Several people witness him on a private beach in the company of a young blonde woman.
Their body language is clear. They're kissing a lot. They're clearly having a good time. They're very affectionate.
Over the days following the legionnaire's suicide, the police searched the family home several more times.
That's when we really go over the apartment with a fine-tooth comb. We go through everything, and we end up finding both Allison's and Marie-Josée's passports, a clear sign that the mother and daughter didn't go anywhere.
The inspections with Blue Star to reveal traces of blood pick up from where they left off on August 1st. They yield a very significant positive result.
They found huge stains. And when I say huge stains, I don't mean a drop. It was really a lot.
It was like being at a nightclub. You turn on ultraviolet light everywhere. You make everything dark, and that's all you can see. From the apartment to the entrance hall, the corridor that leads to the garage, especially all over the garage, which is 60 feet long. It's even on the walls and the doors. It's quite a sight. It looks like a butcher shop. A tragedy has happened here.
On August 7th, a search is carried out at the barracks. Bloodstains are found in the Legionnaire's freezer and in one of the barracks' washing machines. On August 30th, the investigators received the results of the tests on all the samples.
In the end, DNA has spoken several times. First of all, in the freezer's exhaust duct, we find DNA. It's degraded, but it's Allison's DNA. We find more of it in the barracks washing machine. And finally, we find Marie-Josée's DNA, this time very distinctly, in the bloodstains found in the garage on Rue Jean Richepin.
Allison Benitez has been in the freezer. At this point, there is no longer any doubt surrounding the unfortunately highly probable deaths of Marie-Josée and Allison Benitez.
When they hear this terrible news, Eric and Edwige Barbet are devastated.
I still had hope I would see them again. I never expected them to find my niece's blood.
From the moment we found out, we thought, well, that's it. Something has definitely happened. We'll never see them again.
On September 3rd, 2013, the public prosecutor of Perpignan closes the investigation into the disappearances of Marie-Josée and Allison Benitez. On the same day, a new legal investigation is opened, but this time for murder. The investigators are now convinced that the two women have been killed and suspect that Francisco Benitez committed the murders. Then, out of nowhere, a man calls the police station in Perpignan. He states that his ex-wife, who had an affair with Francisco Benitez, vanished overnight in 2004. This woman's name is Simone de Oliveira Alves, and she has never been found. The police are now trying to find out more about the case. Simone de Oliveira Alves met Francisco Benitez in the year 2000. The young Brazilian woman, 24 years old at the time, was a hostess at a nightclub near the barracks in Nîmes, where the legionnaire was working. A single mother of 4 children, she was delighted to meet the serviceman.
He sees Simone regularly. He sleeps over at her place. He even brings Allison, who's very little, to play with Simone's children.
Francisco Benitez leads his young mistress to believe that he's separated from his wife. Marie-Josée, for her part, doesn't suspect her partner's infidelity. But in November 2004, everything changes.
My sister called Paco, and it was Simone who picked up the phone. My sister asked Simone, "Who are you?" Simone told my sister I'm his partner. And my sister said, "No, I'm his partner, not you."
And just like that, his double life falls apart. His double life falls apart.
The young Brazilian decides to end her relationship with the legionnaire. Frederick Ortega Esquire is Simone's family lawyer.
She leaves her children for the weekend as she needs to have a serious conversation with Benitez. She tells her brother she's going to break up with him because she doesn't want anything more to do with him.
But on Monday, November 29th, 2004, Simone doesn't come to pick up her 4 children. No one will see her again after her final weekend with Francisco Benitez. Simone's brother then reports his sister's disappearance to the Nîmes police. A few months later, Francisco Benitez is interviewed by the police.
Strangely, Benitez was only questioned at the Legion's base. In other words, he never spends a minute in police custody. They ask him, "So, what do you know about Simone?" And he says, "Well, listen, she was my girlfriend, but she's disappeared. I received a text from her saying that she didn't want anything more to do with me. I texted back saying that was fine, because I didn't want anything more to do with her either.
When they find out about this text from Simone, the Montpellier police force, who are investigating Marie-Josée and Allison Benitez's disappearances, notice the disturbing similarities between both cases.
She sends him a text saying, "That's it, I'm going, I'm taking my things and I'm leaving." It's the same scenario that he tried to repeat without a doubt with Marie-Josée and Allison.
The investigation into Simón de Oliveira Alves' disappearance, closed in 2007, is reopened on August 8, 2013, and Francisco Benitez is now a suspect.
He was someone who didn't like things not going his way. And Simone had found out something she wasn't supposed to. Chances are he didn't like that at all, and he got rid of her.
Could Francisco Benitez be involved in other crimes?
The question is, if he's capable of killing 3 women, has he killed others before?
I wouldn't be surprised to hear about more things happening in the places he was deployed.
I wonder if something happened in Spain when he was with the Spanish Legion. I wonder if he did something to a Spanish woman too. And that's why he came to France and joined the French Foreign Legion, to hide from the Spanish Legion. I don't know.
According to Alexis Kent, there's no way the French Foreign Legion would have willingly covered up a recruit's criminal past.
We accept some delinquents. Yes, I admit it. Anyway, it isn't a secret. Someone who stole their mother's checkbook or a car stereo can get accepted, yes. But criminals? To my knowledge, definitely not. The applicant recruitment rate is only 17%. 1.7 in 10 are recruited to be legionnaires. We have a choice. We don't need to take on people who can cause us issues later.
It's striking, Jean-Marc, how many things Simón de Oliveira Alves and Marie-Josée Benitez have in common. And of course, how similar the circumstances of their disappearances are.
Yes, that's true. Simone and Marie-Josée meet Francisco Benitez at a particularly difficult time in their lives. They're both single mothers who are a bit lost, working in nightclubs. They easily fall into Benitez's trap. He knew how to seduce them with his charisma, his smooth talk, his appearance, and his reassuring and protective qualities. It's a bit like in Edith Piaf's song, Mon Legionnaire. And there's another essential thing they have in common, which is that the moment they decide to leave him, they both disappear.
How do you explain the police's lack of interest in Francisco Benitez when Simón de Oliveira Alves went missing?
He convinced the investigators that it was a voluntary disappearance. We've seen how persuasive he can be. And then I'll remind you, not long after the incident, he was transferred to Mayotte, which enabled him to go off the investigators' radar.
Today, Francisco Benitez is highly suspected of having killed Simone, Marie-Josée, and Allison. Some think the legionnaire could have committed other crimes. Do you think we're dealing with a serial killer?
What is certain is that Francisco Benitez's profile doesn't match the archetypal serial killer, who is often a sexual predator that chooses his prey at random. But of course, we can wonder about his involvement in other crimes, which is what the investigators did by going back over the files of unsolved murders of women in the region, but nothing came out of it.
We know next to nothing about Francisco Benitez's past in Spain, and we don't know why he joined the French Foreign Legion. This led his sister-in-law to say he may have joined the military to flee his country of origin and escape possible prosecution. Does this seem likely to you?
There are a lot of fantasies about the French Foreign Legion, but let's make one thing clear. It isn't a gang of bandits which lets criminals run from the law. Like every new recruit, Francisco Benitez underwent a background check when he joined, and his criminal record was perfectly clean. Of course, this doesn't mean he hadn't already committed homicide without the Spanish police suspecting him.
At the same time as these different investigations, officers on the Montpellier police force continue to probe the disappearances of Marie-Josée and Allison Benitez, Using evidence obtained through their inquiries, they try to establish the crime's sequence of events. What happened on Sunday, July 14, 2013? The police know that Marie-Josée stopped answering her phone from 1 p.m. They're convinced that she was killed first, in the morning, while her daughter Allison was at the beach preparing for her beauty pageant. A violent argument between Francisco Benitez and his wife was most likely what set the tragedy in motion.
I think things got heated, and Marie-Josée threatened to tell someone what she knew if he didn't let her leave.
Was she going to reveal the story about Simón Oliveira? Maybe she knew and she wanted to turn him into the police.
And that's when Paco flew into a rage and did something to her.
After allegedly killing his wife, Francisco Benitez went to pick up his daughter, who was having lunch with other Miss Roussillon contestants. Thanks to the phone records of Allison and the legionnaire, the police know they arrived at Rue Jean Richepin at 2:30 p.m. From 2:34 p.m., text to Allison's phone remained unanswered.
I think when Allison got home, she tried to find out where her mom was. Allison was hysterical, and I think there was likely more of a struggle with Allison than with Marie-Josée.
The investigators examined the footprints found on the floor of the apartment entrance, down the building staircase, and in the garage.
That's when they came up with a theory that Allison ran off and got trapped in the garage.
From this point on, his military instinct took over from his fatherly instinct, and he went too far. He had had enough.
Considering the quantity of blood, I think Allison suffered more than her mother.
But how do you explain this crime of infanticide by a father who, according to everyone, adored his daughter?
His abandonment anxiety over the imminent breakup and his inability to bear the breakup made him extremely dangerous. He was ready to put an end to the cause of his suffering. The loving relationships were shattered, and even his paternal love couldn't prevail. In other words, I'd prefer to destroy those I love than see them taken away from me.
The investigation is unable to establish how both victims were killed. Without bodies, it's impossible to answer this question. So the police do everything in their power to find out where Francisco Benitez hid his wife and daughter's bodies.
We can see that between July 14th and 19th, Francisco Benitez's cell phone was traced on several occasions to the Leucate area, and at unusual times of day, for example, at night.
The Legionnaire's cell phone is traced to the pine forest around the Port Leucate water treatment plant.
It's mostly an area where people go for daytime walks with family or friends. So it already looks suspicious that he went there at night. And even more suspicious that he went there after his wife and daughter went missing.
September 10th, 2013 marked the beginning of an exhaustive search.
They started by combing through the whole pine forest around the water treatment plant with specialist equipment and search and rescue dogs. They didn't find anything. Then they asked for backup from 60 officers who came, but they still found nothing.
The lake surrounding the forest is searched by divers. The search then spreads to military areas around Perpignan. In these areas, only the army is authorized to carry out investigations.
These searches didn't achieve results, but we don't know what resources were deployed or which particular areas were covered. This leaves us a bit disappointed.
After over a month of painstaking searches, Marie-Josée and Allison's bodies are still nowhere to be found.
You can imagine that this man, considering his profession as a legionnaire, was able to make bodies disappear so they wouldn't be found.
When you're in the army, as a general rule, it's to fight. So you learn how to fight. You learn how to kill people. You might also learn how to make sure the remains aren't found.
I don't see any connection between what happened on those missions and being able to kill his wife and daughter. With his wife, you could say she cheated on him. She was going to leave him, but he loved his daughter so much.
The investigators wonder how Francisco Benitez was able to clean the crime scene and take his wife and daughter's bodies out of the apartment before getting rid of them, without drawing attention from witnesses. This raises the question of a possible accomplice. The Legionnaire's personal and professional circles are now at the center of the investigation.
There are some people suspected of having helped him, perhaps without knowing what he had done. Maybe not helped him during the crimes, but perhaps supporting him after.
First and foremost, the police are interested in the young blonde woman who was seen with Francisco Benitez on the beach in Leucat a few days after the disappearances. She is identified as Maria Teresa, a married woman from Spain who lives in Barcelona. When questioned by the investigators, she admits to having been the Legionnaire's mistress. She also admits to coming to Perpignan between July 19th and 20th and spending the night at her lover's home in Rue Jean Rispin.
At that time, Francisco Benitez allegedly told her that his wife and daughter were away for a few days and wouldn't be back until the following Monday, so she explains that she had no reason to be concerned.
The night before his suicide, Francisco Benitez called his mistress several times, but the wiretaps reveal nothing suspicious. It's clear that Maria Teresa was not involved in Marie-Josée and Allison's disappearances. The investigators then turn their attention to Francisco Benitez's professional circle.
No legionnaires came to the police on their own initiative to report what they may have heard or seen.
In fact, witness statements concerning Francisco Benitez's suspicious activities, his transportation of the freezer, and his washing of the bloody sheet were only taken after the Legionnaire's suicide.
In general, secrets are kept. There's a reason the army is nicknamed the Great Mute in French. There are guidelines. Every legionnaire is your brother, and you must help him. And above all, it's a big family. That's true.
It really gets to me, because we work hard in the Legion. I don't believe it. It's very hard to imagine that in a case as big as the Benitez case, someone from the army could have helped him and kept quiet. For me, it's unthinkable.
The French Foreign Legion has never publicly commented on the case. Edwige Barbet is convinced that the Legionnaires are still hiding crucial information.
I just want them to talk, so that my family can at least breathe.
To this day, no evidence from the investigation proves that Francisco Benitez was assisted by any of his colleagues. But the police still wonder if someone helped the suspect clean the crime scene and dispose of the bodies. In particular, they question the role of Lydia, Marie-Josée's eldest daughter.
The atmosphere was clearly a bit tense between mother and daughter. This was nothing new. Lydia had a better relationship with Francisco Benitez than with her mother.
How come Lydia didn't react to the text from her mother announcing that she was leaving with Allison?
She didn't call her mother at all. That's what's so worrying. She tried to contact her mother on July 17th. Not before.
According to Laurent Epei Esquire, Lydia's lawyer, his client's behavior can be easily explained.
The possibility of a divorce has been on the table for some time. And I think she feels this is a situation where there's probably no turning back. The idea that her mother might decide to leave and move out of the family home is entirely believable.
Eric Barbet doesn't understand his niece's attitude.
Why didn't she call her to say, Mom, listen, sleep at a hotel, because tomorrow I'll come visit for a week. We can talk about it. Maybe things will calm down.
The police learned that a few days after her mother and sister went missing, Lydia came to Perpignan to support Francisco Benitez.
Lydia told me she had stayed over at the barracks, but they hadn't spoken about Marie-Josée leaving. I don't understand that. There are questions you have to ask. You try to find out what happened. Or else, there are things he's told her. There are secrets she doesn't want to reveal.
On Saturday, August 3rd, the young woman spent the night with her stepfather in his office at the French Foreign Legion.
Imagine sleeping at the Legion on a queen-size mattress. That's what she said. I'm not the one saying that. It was her. There was a queen-size mattress, so she slept with Paco on the same mattress.
She views him as a father figure because he's present, because he's affectionate, because he's a man who takes care of her, quite simply. He's her surrogate father, unquestionably. He's the main provider for the family. And that includes emotional needs. She's grown up with him. She calls him Dad.
The next morning, on Sunday, August 4th, Lydia filmed her stepfather's statement.
I think from her point of view, Mr. Benitez made her think this video needed to be broadcast so her mother would see it. She believed in good faith that this was an opportunity to help her mother and Allison come home. At that point, there was no question in her mind of them having died.
I want to tell all the reporters that the investigation is ongoing.
That same day, Francisco Benitez's stepdaughter also recorded a message to her mother and sister.
And above all, I want to tell my mom and Allison to send us a sign. There won't be any repercussions. We'll do whatever it takes to help them come home discreetly.
The fact she's there with him could make people think that they're somehow working together. But there's nothing on file. There are no charges, and she's not under investigation. And there is absolutely no evidence of anything.
All the bad things that have been said affect us deeply with everything we're going through.
I think she's a nice girl, but she's really overwhelmed. Every time she comes in, she cries.
Today, Lydia and her sister Roxanne still refuse to accept their stepfather's guilt.
They haven't forgotten that Mr. Benitez was like a father to them. They haven't forgotten that Allison was Mr. Benitez's daughter. The theory that he's responsible for the two people's deaths is extremely hard for them to believe. Because on one hand, logic dictates that it's true, but in their hearts, they can't accept it.
Lydia and Roxanne declined to answer our questions.
They have made me their spokesperson, mainly because they feel they won't be understood, since they don't have the clear-cut position that other family members have. Morally, none of the theories are satisfactory for them.
Police inquiries found that in the days after his wife and daughter vanished, Francisco Benitez came to this beach to work on his tan. He calmly went out for dinner with friends, and he invited his mistress to spend the night at the family's apartment where he most likely committed the murders.
Firstly, it proves that by this point, he has gotten rid of the bodies. It also proves that he has cleaned the crime scene, in this case, the apartment. But above all, it proves he feels no remorse. We're dealing with what psychiatrists call a pathological narcissist, meaning someone who's entirely self-centered and who feels no empathy. This is someone who plays with others a bit like how a cat plays with a mouse.
We know a legionnaire helped Francisco move the freezer, and another saw him washing a bloody sheet in the middle of the barracks. Neither of these men gave statements of their own volition. Do you think Francisco Benitez had help from his colleagues in the French Foreign Legion?
No, I don't think either of these legionnaires sought to cover up their colleagues' actions in any way. I simply think they behaved like soldiers, meaning they waited for the police's questions before answering them. Their statements were only made after the suicide. You know, Arnaud, in the army you don't anticipate orders, you respond to them.
Do you think Francisco Benitez confided in one of his brothers in arms?
No, sincerely I don't think so. And for one simple reason, Francisco Benitez was involved in many military theaters of operations. He fought in the Gulf War, in ex-Yugoslavia, in Chad, in the Central African Republic. He overcame the taboo of killing long ago. So for a long time, he'd had no need to confide in anyone.
There's also the question of whether Francisco Benitez's stepdaughter helped him. She was with him the weekend before his suicide. Her presence at her stepfather's side when the disappearances were reported lent credence to the theory that Allison and Marie-Josée had left voluntarily.
I don't believe for a second that his stepdaughter was involved. On the contrary, I think Benitez used her. He manipulated her, particularly when he sent her the supposed text from her mother announcing her move to Toulouse. She's one of Benitez's victims of collateral damage. She can't imagine that the man she has known for 12 years, who raised her, who she loves like a father, could have committed such acts.
Cases where the victims' bodies are not found always remain somewhat of a mystery. This double homicide with no bodies and no trial for the now deceased suspect will never be solved. Do you think the investigation should continue anyway, or is it time to close the case?
One thing's for sure, without a trial, there will never be judicial truth. But I still think the searches for Allison and Marie-Josée's bodies should go on. Finding their bodies could perhaps shed some light on the circumstances of the murders, clear up any remaining doubts, and ease the family's suffering.
Today, Marie-Josée Benitez's brother and sister are heartbroken by the tragedy that has befallen their family.
I have to keep going because I don't have a choice. But I don't feel good about it. I really don't feel good.
I don't do anything else apart from this. I read, I listen, I make calls. This is my whole life. Waiting for the phone to ring. Waiting for someone to say, Mr. Barbet, we found them.
Their sister and niece disappeared. But without bodies, they can't grieve.
They aren't far. I'm going to find them. I promise you, I'll do whatever I can to find them. I don't care if it puts me in danger. I will find my sister.
Maybe it will happen by chance. Maybe hunters. Maybe the police. Maybe... But I'm convinced we'll find them.
Only a new testimony could fully clear up the mystery of this double disappearance.
We can't rule out the possibility of people coming forward and changing their statements.
Marie-Josée Benitez was 53 years old. She was about to take back control of her life by leaving the man she had been madly in love with before she realized how much his infidelities and lies had hurt her. The investigators are now convinced that her husband, Francisco Benitez, chose to kill her rather than let her go. Allison was 19 years old. Treated like a princess by both her parents, the young woman dreamed of being Miss France. Her father, despite wanting her to be crowned too, decided to put an end to all her dreams. Both of them have vanished forever, but their memories will continue to motivate their loved ones to one day find the truth behind the tragedy. Good night.